The night was particularly dark, the relentless rain tapping like a sad melody on the roof of James's car. He drove his luxury black sedan, the lights reflecting on the puddles that covered the city streets. The windshield wipers rhythmically battled the droplets that fogged his view, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the shadows of the important presentation he had ahead. This meeting was not just another item on his agenda, it was the kind that could define the future of his international business. As the headlights sliced through the darkness, James reviewed every point of his speech, anticipating his partner's reactions. However, as he stopped at a red light, a scene on the roadside captured his attention and diverted his meticulously aligned thoughts. Under the weak glow of a street light, a hunched figure stirred his compassion. A young woman with a baby wrapped in a tattered blanket was hunched against the cold, trying to shield the child from the merciless rain. The sight was heart-wrenching, and an internal voice urgently whispered, "Help them, don't just pass by." James shook his head, trying to rid himself of the intrusive thought. "It's raining, and I really don't have time right now," he argued with himself, his hand on the steering wheel trembling slightly. "Someone else will help, they have to." The light turned green, and he accelerated, trying to leave the image behind. But conscience is a tenacious adversary. The woman and the baby haunted him, a constant reminder in his rearview mirror of his own humanity and vulnerability. It wasn't long before a more sinister figure detached from the shadows. A tall man with his hood pulled over his head began to approach the woman threateningly. She tried to move away but tripped and fell with a muffled scream, clutching the baby tightly against her. That was too much for James to ignore. He hit the brakes, parked the car with a sharp stop, and jumped out, unconcerned about the rain now soaking him. The man, noticing his approach, turned around and vanished as quickly as he had appeared, swallowed by the night. James approached the woman, immediately noticing her blue eyes marked by fear and uncertainty. "Are you all right?" he asked, extending his hand cautiously. She looked up, surprised by the sudden presence of a stranger. "Yes, I think so," she replied hesitantly, her voice trembling more than her soaked shoulders. His gaze fell on her knee, visibly injured and at an odd angle. "Your knee doesn't look good," he observed, concerned. The woman sighed, a mix of pain and resignation. "I hurt it earlier today. That man chased me for almost 2 blocks, I fell while trying to escape." "Do you know him?" James asked, now with a tone loaded with concern. She shook her head, protecting the baby even closer to herself. "No, I've never seen him before. I don't know what he wanted from me, from us." James felt a tightening in his heart upon hearing her words. He looked around, making sure the assailant was not nearby, then made a quick decision. "Let's get you to the hospital. It's not safe to stay here." He carefully helped her to stand, supporting her as they walked toward his car. As he settled the woman and the baby in the passenger seat, the rain lessened as if even the sky paused to breathe. James knew his night was about to take a completely different turn from what was planned, but something inside him felt this was exactly where he needed to be. As he drove towards the hospital, the woman began to introduce herself. "My name is Sarah White," she said, her voice still shaky, "and this is Lily, my daughter." James nodded, a sign that he had listened, but his eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. The important meeting would have to wait. As the car glided through the now quiet streets after the rain, James tried to keep his focus on the road, but his attention was continuously drawn to the woman beside him. Sarah held Lily close to her chest, the child's small head hidden under the blanket she used to shield her from the cold. "How did you end up on the street in this condition?" James asked, breaking the silence that had settled since they left the traffic light. Sarah sighed deeply, her eyes fixed on the fogged window. My life hasn't been easy, she began, her voice low and slightly trembling. I grew up in an abusive home. My mother died when I was 10, and my father, he never got over the loss. He took his anger out on me. When Lily was born, I knew I had to escape. I couldn't let her grow up in that environment. James felt a pang in his heart as he listened to Sarah's words. You are very brave, he said, admiring the strength of this woman who, even under such adverse circumstances, struggled to give her daughter a better life. Sarah offered a faint smile, thanking him with a nod. I just want Lily to have a chance to be happy, something I rarely had. Upon arriving at the hospital, James helped Sarah out of the car, holding Lily while she balanced on her injured knee. They walked to the emergency room entrance, where he explained the situation to the receptionist, who quickly called a nurse. As Sarah was being attended to, James filled out the necessary forms and left clear instructions to use his credit card for any medical expenses. Please make sure she and the baby receive everything they need, he told the nurse, his tone firm and concerned. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with a sympathetic look, nodded, touched by the man's evident concern. Don't worry, sir, we'll take care of them. James turned to Sarah, who was seated in a wheelchair, Lily now sleeping serenely in her arms. I need to go now, but I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised, feeling a strange reluctance to leave them. Thank you for everything, James. I don't know what I would have done without your help today, Sarah said, her blue eyes full of gratitude. He smiled, a nod that hid the complexity of emotions he felt. Take care. I'll be back soon, he assured her, and with one last look at Lily, he returned to his car, heading back to his world of business and meetings. On the way back, James couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected twists of life. The image of Sarah and Lily remained vivid in his mind, a powerful reminder of the realities that often went unnoticed in his daily routine. As he parked the car at the building where the meeting awaited him, he received an urgent call from his assistant, Laura, who spoke rapidly on the phone. Sir, everyone has arrived for the meeting. You're the only one missing. I'm already entering the elevator, James replied, hanging up shortly after. He took a deep breath, trying to mentally prepare for the transition from one world to another, but knowing that something inside him had irrevocably changed on that rainy night. The elevator ascended slowly while the echo of Laura's hurried words still reverberated in James's mind. He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture more out of distraction than necessity, as he tried to push away the persistent images of Sarah and Lily. Focus, James. Business now, he murmured to himself, trying to summon the coolness and focus his position demanded. The sound of the elevator bell signaled his arrival at the correct floor, and he stepped out, his expression now hardened. Laura awaited him outside, clearly relieved to see him. Sir, everyone is waiting. They've asked about you twice already, she said, her tone mixing concern and relief. Understood, Laura. Let's handle this now, he responded with a brief but decisive nod. They walked together down the polished corridor to the conference room where a group of partners and investors were restlessly stirring. As he entered, all eyes immediately turned towards him, loaded with expectations and a hint of irritation. James, where have you been? We are behind schedule, said one of the partners, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. I apologize for the delay. I had an unexpected issue, James replied, keeping his voice steady and composed, but I am here now, and we can begin. Let's focus on what's important. Without waiting for more questions, he moved to the head of the table, opened his laptop, and started his presentation. The slides projected on the wall displayed graphs and future projections, each meticulously prepared to persuade and convince. As he spoke, his mind occasionally drifted to Sarah and Lily, but he used each memory as a catalyst to boost his performance. The meeting, initially tense due to his delay, gradually transformed. The expressions of those present softened, replaced by nods of agreement and murmurs of approval. James, with his usual skill, navigated through complex questions and hypothetical scenarios, defending his positions with the precision of an experienced strategist. As the hours passed, the charged atmosphere gave way to a palpable feeling of accomplishment. When the last slide was presented and the last question answered, a respectful silence filled the room. It was Laura who broke the silence, her face lit up with a proud smile. "Congratulations, sir, for once again closing an incredible deal. It was exceptional, even with the delay." James nodded, allowing himself a brief moment of satisfaction before closing his laptop. "Thank you, everyone, for your patience and engagement. I appreciate the trust and assure you the results will speak for themselves." The partners stood up, approaching to shake hands and pat backs, each echoing Laura's sentiments. As the room emptied, James remained for a moment, his thoughts now entirely focused on the woman and child at the hospital. "Laura, could you please wrap things up here? I need to check on something before ending the day," he said, already heading towards the door. "Of course, sir. All is well here," she replied as he hurried out, his mind already calculating how long it would take to return to the hospital. As he reached the parking lot of the building, James realized he couldn't simply return to his routine. Something about that rainy night had altered his perspective, and he knew he needed to see Sarah and Lily again to ensure they were safe and well cared for. As he drove back to the hospital, his phone rang several times, but he ignored it, focused on his new priority. Upon arriving at the hospital, he was greeted with a polite smile from the receptionist who promptly began to search for information in the system. "Sir, it appears that Sarah White and the baby were discharged at the end of the night shift," the receptionist informed him, her voice neutral. James furrowed his brow, the news falling like a bucket of cold water on his expectations. "Did they leave any contact, any address where they went?" he asked, trying to hide the urgency in his voice. The receptionist checked again, her fingers agile on the keyboard. "Unfortunately, there is nothing recorded here beyond the initial care. I'm sorry, I can't help more than that." Thanking her with a nod, James turned away from the counter, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. He walked slowly back to his car, each step echoing his growing sense of frustration and concern. As he drove back home, the reality of the situation began to settle in. Without any clues about the whereabouts of Sarah and Lily and no immediate ways to locate them, James faced a weekend of uncertainties. Upon entering his home, he immediately went to his office, rummaging through his bag in search of his cell phone to see if there was any missed call or message that could be a clue. However, when he tried to turn it on, he discovered that the device was completely discharged. With a sigh of frustration, he placed the cell phone on the charger, his gaze lost in the void as he pondered the next step. That night, as he dined alone, the restlessness and concern only grew, setting the stage for a long and agonizing weekend marked by the absence of news about Sarah and Lily. The next morning, as soon as his phone had enough charge, a series of notifications popped up on the screen, all indicating transactions made with the credit card he had left with Sarah at the hospital. James scanned the amounts and descriptions of the purchases: high-end electronics, a large-screen television, and even a gaming console. His jaw tightened in frustration and disappointment. How could she, he murmured to himself, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Determined to clarify the facts, he donned his coat and left, heading to the electronics store where the purchases had been made. Upon arriving at the store, the atmosphere was bustling with customers exploring the latest technological innovations. James immediately approached the customer service desk, where a young employee greeted him with a polite smile. "Good morning, I need help with some suspicious transactions that were made here yesterday," James explained, showing the notifications on his phone. The employee, somewhat surprised by the situation, called the manager. "Let's check that for you, sir," said the manager, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression. "If you can give us a description of who made these purchases, we can start from there." James described Sarah and also mentioned the suspicious man he had seen the night of the encounter. The manager agreed to access the security camera recordings, and they headed to the back room where the monitors were kept. As the footage from the previous night appeared on the screen, James watched attentively, expecting to see Sarah making the purchases. However, to his surprise and dismay, it was not Sarah who appeared in the recording but rather the man he had seen approaching her that rainy night. The man moved through the store aisles, selecting the most expensive items with an ease that irritated James. "That's the man," he pointed at the screen, anger rising within him. "But I don't see Sarah with him. Were they together? Was it all a scam?" The manager paused the image, clearly showing the man's face. "We don't recognize him as one of our regular customers," she commented, "and we definitely didn't see the woman you described." Frustrated but now with more questions than answers, James thanked the manager for her assistance and left the store. The possibility of having been deceived, of Sarah possibly colluding with that man, gnawed him internally. Yet, something inside him still resisted believing that it was all just a ruse. Determined to uncover the whole truth, James decided that his next step would be to confront the man from the images directly if he could find him. With a copy of the security footage in hand and the image of the suspect etched in his mind, he got into his car, heading to the nearest police station to file a report and seek help from the authorities. Armed with the security footage and seething with a mix of determination and anger, James arrived at the local police station. The corridors were bustling, filled with the characteristic hum of a busy morning. He approached the reception desk where a uniformed police officer greeted him with a look of professional caution. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, noting the tense expression on James's face. "Yes, I need to report a fraud and possibly a case of manipulation." "I believe this man," James said, handing over a copy of the security recording to the officer, "is involved and he might be trying to harm an innocent woman." The officer reviewed the footage briefly and called in a detective. James explained the entire situation, from his encounter with Sarah and Lily to the discovery of the fraudulent purchases. The detective, a middle-aged man with a penetrating gaze, listened attentively and agreed to help. "Let's see what we can do to locate this man." "You said you have his address, right?" the detective asked. With assistance from the electronics store, James had obtained the address of the suspect, which was registered for the delivery of the purchased items. Armed with this information, James, the detective, and a team of police officers headed to the indicated area, a worn-down and impoverished neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Upon arrival, the detective coordinated a cautious approach. The narrow streets and dilapidated houses painted a picture of neglect. James felt growing tension, each step brought them closer to the man he had seen in the security footage. Suddenly, as they turned a corner, James spotted the man. "There he is," he exclaimed, pointing. The suspect, realizing he was being watched, began to run. The officers sprang into action, chasing the man through the tight alleyways. After several tense minutes, they managed to apprehend him, handcuffing him as he struggled to break free. Back at the station, the man, identified as Victor, was placed in an interrogation room. James watched through the one-way glass as the detective began the interrogation. "Why were you using someone else's credit card to purchase expensive items?" the detective asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Victor looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "It was Sarah. She gave me the card, said I could use it to buy some things," he claimed, his voice faltering. James, listening from behind the glass, felt a wave of frustration and disbelief. He and the officers exchanged skeptical looks. "He's lying," James muttered to himself, almost unable to believe that Sarah could be involved, but doubt began to set in, leaving an uncomfortable feeling. "Let's verify this story," the detective said, leaving the room to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, James sat in the waiting room of the station, his thoughts swirling. Everything seemed increasingly complicated, and he knew he needed to keep a cool head to uncover the truth. After the tumultuous interrogation, James felt powerless and confused. He decided to let the police and his lawyer, Michael, handle the case. In the days that followed, he dove back into work, trying to push thoughts of Sarah, Lily, and the mysterious Victor from his mind. However, uncertainty continued to echo in his thoughts, a persistent shadow over his days. 2 weeks of restlessness and hard work passed when, on a quiet afternoon, James's cell phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. He was in the middle of a meeting and ignored the call, assuming it could be a salesperson or some sort of spam. When the phone rang again, he silenced it without looking. The third time, curiosity and an inexplicable sense of urgency made him answer. "Hello?" he spoke, his voice tinged with slight irritation from the interruption. On the other end, there was a pause, and then a female voice, tremulous and hesitant, spoke quickly. "I'm sorry, I was forced to do this," said the voice, and before James could respond, the line was cut off, leaving a buzzing silence in his ear. James stood still, holding the phone to his ear, trying to process the words. "Forced to do what?" he murmured to himself, perplexed. The voice seemed familiar, but the rapidity of the call left him doubting his own senses. Returning to the table, he stared at the cell phone display, hoping the person would call back, but the phone remained silent. "Is this another trick?" he thought, suspicion now a constant companion. Making a quick decision, he left the conference room and went straight to Michael's office. "Michael, I just received a strange call. A woman said she was forced to do this and then hung up. I need to find out if it was Sarah. Can you trace the number?" Michael, always pragmatic and efficient, nodded while already starting to type on his laptop. "Let's see what we can find out, James. These calls could be a breakthrough or a new layer of this confusion." As Michael worked, James sat down, his mind racing. The uncertainty about the intention behind the call consumed him. If it was Sarah, why would she call after all this time, and what had she been forced to do? The possibility that she might be in danger began to take shape in his mind, bringing with it a new sense of urgency. Michael finally looked up, his expression serious. "The number is from a public phone, which complicates things a bit, but it's located in an area close to where you said you first encountered Sarah. It's worth investigating." With this new information, James felt renewed determination. "Let's go then," he said, picking up his car keys. "If there's any chance this could lead us to Sarah and clarify this whole situation, then I need to check it out personally." They left the office, the sky already darkening as they headed to the location of the phone booth, each lost in their thoughts about what they might discover when they arrived there. James and Michael arrived at the location where the phone booth was situated, a dark corner on a poorly lit street. The public telephone, an almost forgotten relic of urban communication, seemed an anachronistic point in the modern landscape. I'll try calling the number back, James said, pulling out his cell phone. His fingers hesitated for a moment before dialing the number from the received call. As the phone rang, he felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Finally, the call was answered. "Hello, is this you, Sarah, if that is your real name?" James said, his voice tinged with suspicion. There was a pause on the other end, then a tearful and clearly distressed voice responded. "Yes, it's me, James. I'm so sorry for everything. I was forced to give the card to Victor. He's a loan shark. He was threatening me and my daughter. I tried to escape, but he found us." James's heart raced as he heard the confirmation of his suspicions and fears. "Sarah, where are you now? I need more details. How did he find you, and how did he threaten you?" She sobbed before responding, her voice still shaky. "I'm hiding now. He found me a day after I left the hospital. Victor knew where I used to go. He forced me to give him the card, saying that if I didn't, something bad would happen to Lily." Sarah's anguish was palpable even through the distance. "Please, James, you need to believe me. I'm sending you the address where I am now. You can come and check my documents, see for yourself who I am." James quickly noted down the address Sarah provided. "I'm on my way. Stay where you are and don't talk to anyone else about this," he instructed while Michael, who was beside him, listened intently. As soon as he hung up, James turned to Michael. "She's in danger, Michael. We need to help her." Michael nodded, his expression grave. "I'll contact the police to make sure we have support. We don't know what kind of situation we're going to find." Together, they returned to the car and drove to the address provided by Sarah. The journey was silent, both men lost in their thoughts about the possible implications of what they were about to discover. Upon arriving at the location, a worn-down building in an even more forgotten area of the city, James felt a knot form in his stomach. "I hope we're still in time," he murmured as they climbed the steps to the indicated apartment. James knocked on the door, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. Moments later, the door slowly opened, and Sarah appeared, visibly shaken but alive. She quickly let them in, looking nervously down the hallway before closing the door. Inside the apartment, James could see documents scattered over a small dining table, evidence of Sarah's life, perhaps enough to clarify everything. But before they could talk further, James's phone rang again, interrupting the moment. It was his lawyer with urgent news about Victor. In the days following the visit to Sarah's apartment, James and Michael worked tirelessly to unravel each piece of the puzzle that involved Sarah's life. The urgency of the situation motivated them at every step. As they awaited the promised information from James's lawyer, the tension was palpable. Finally, James's phone rang. It was Michael with news. "James, I have good news and some important confirmations," Michael began. "We've managed to verify Sarah's identity through a series of documents and records. She is indeed who she says she is, Sarah White, daughter of Edward White, and her father has a disturbing history with several assault complaints registered against him." James felt a mix of relief and anxiety upon hearing these words. "This explains a lot, Michael, but it also increases my concern for her and little Lily's safety. We need to act quickly." "I fully agree," Michael replied. "I will continue to investigate and keep you informed of any developments." After hanging up, James grabbed his cell phone with renewed determination. He dialed Sarah's number, hoping to speak with her about the findings and discuss the next steps to ensure her safety. The phone rang several times before Sarah finally answered. "James," her voice sounded cautious and slightly tremulous. "Sarah, it's me. I received some important information from my lawyer that we need to discuss. Are you in a safe place right now? James asked, his voice laden with concern. Before Sarah could respond, a loud bang interrupted the conversation. James heard the sound of something heavy hitting what seemed to be a door. "Sarah, what's happening there?" he exclaimed, his heart racing with the fear of what that might mean. "James," Sarah began but was interrupted by another bang followed by muffled screams. The phone fell, and the sound of fighting and confusion took over the environment. "Sarah!" James shouted into the phone, unable to do more than listen. The sound of a door being broken down and more screams filled his ears, increasing his desperation. Not knowing what else to do, James rushed to his car, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the sounds of a fight that seemed to grow more violent. As he drove back to Sarah's apartment, he tried to remain calm, but fear and worry dominated his thoughts. Approaching the location, the sound of sirens could already be heard in the distance. The call was still connected, but only indistinct noises and occasional words from Sarah could be heard. James parked the car hastily and ran towards the building, hoping to find Sarah safe but fearing the worst. James raced down the hallway of Sarah's building, the phone pressed against his ear as he listened to the sounds of struggle and desperation from the other side of the line. "Did Victor go after her?" he shouted to the lawyer, who was still on the phone trying to coordinate a response with the police. "He escaped custody a few days ago," Michael said, his voice tense, conveying the gravity of the situation. "Sorry, James, I didn't think it was important to inform you earlier. We didn't think he would attempt something so direct. This is crucial, Michael. We need the police there now," James exclaimed as he climbed the stairs, taking two at a time. "I'm heading to her apartment. Do whatever you can to bring help." As he reached Sarah's floor, he headed to her apartment with his heart pounding furiously in his chest. The hallway was eerily silent, but the muffled sounds of fighting still came through the phone, giving him an even greater sense of urgency. He reached the door, which was ajar, a clear sign of forced entry visible on the damaged lock. "Sarah," he called out as he pushed the door open and entered. The apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, and personal items scattered across the floor. The sound of a struggle came from the bedroom at the end of the hallway. James advanced through the apartment, his heart loud in his ears as he approached the bedroom. The sounds of fighting intensified. With a push, he opened the bedroom door and saw Sarah struggling to free herself from a man that James immediately recognized as Victor. "Let her go," James shouted, moving in to intervene. Victor, surprised by the sudden interruption, released Sarah and turned to face James. "You shouldn't be here," Victor growled, positioning himself defensively. Sarah, trembling and with tears in her eyes, retreated to a corner of the room, watching the scene with evident terror. Without hesitation, James advanced on Victor, using all the adrenaline the moment demanded. They fought, a tense physical confrontation that knocked more furniture around as they struggled. James managed to land a blow that caused Victor to stumble backward, crashing against the wall. "Sarah, I'm okay," she managed to say, her voice a tremulous whisper. At that moment, the sounds of approaching sirens could be heard in the distance. The police, finally alerted by Michael, were arriving. James kept Victor subdued, waiting for the police to enter and take control of the situation. As he held Victor, relief at having arrived in time mixed with anger over the danger Sarah and Lily had faced. He knew the next few hours would be crucial to ensure Victor no longer posed a threat. "It's all right now, Sarah." "It's all right," James repeated, trying to calm both himself and her as the police finally burst through the apartment, ready to take charge of the situation. James's heart raced frantically as he drove at high speed through the nearly empty streets, each traffic light and curve intensifying the tension that already consumed him. The urgency to reach Sarah's apartment before something worse happened propelled him, making him almost completely ignore the speed limits. As soon as he arrived at the building, he parked the car with a jolt and ran out, not even bothering to lock the door. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins as he crossed the lobby and climbed the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, not waiting for the elevator. Each step was guided by the sound of Sarah's despair still echoing in his mind. Reaching the hallway of her apartment, James saw the door ajar. Without hesitation, he entered, his heart pounding against his chest. Inside the apartment, the sounds of struggle were clear and directed James straight to Sarah's bedroom. There, he found Victor trying to force his way into the room where Sarah was evidently locked in. Without a second thought, James yelled, "Victor, step away from her now." Surprised by James's sudden arrival, Victor turned around with an expression of fury. "This is none of your business, James," he growled, advancing towards James with brutal determination. Though not a professional fighter, James had trained in some forms of personal defense and was prepared to use all his skills. He positioned himself defensively, sizing up his opponent, and when Victor charged, James used Victor's own momentum against him, dodging and applying an arm lock that brought him to the ground with a grunt of pain. "She will never be your property, Victor." "This ends now," James shouted, keeping Victor immobilized on the ground. At that moment, the police, alerted by Michael, finally arrived, storming into the apartment with quick and firm steps. They quickly assessed the situation and handcuffed Victor, who still tried to struggle. With Victor now under police custody, James turned to the bedroom door, which was locked. "Sarah, it's me, James. It's all safe now. You can open the door." There was a pause, and then the sound of locks being undone. The door slowly opened, and Sarah appeared, visibly shaken, her eyes red and swollen from tears. Upon seeing James, she ran to him, embracing him tightly. "James, I don't know what I would have done without you. Thank you for not giving up on me," she sobbed, clinging to him as if she never wanted to let go. James comforted her, holding her tightly. "You'll never have to face something like this alone again, Sarah. We'll make sure he can't hurt you again," he promised, feeling a mix of relief and anger thinking about the terror she had endured. As the police began to ask questions and process the scene, James stayed by Sarah's side, ensuring she felt safe and protected. However, despite the immediate relief, he knew there were still challenges ahead. They would need to face the legal and emotional consequences of what had happened. In the days following the confrontation with Victor, Sarah's life began to take a new direction under James's protection and care. Although the trauma of the incident still loomed over her like a shadow, James's constant and reassuring presence offered a counterpoint of safety and comfort. James became a constant figure in Sarah's apartment, helping her to rebuild not just the physical space that had been damaged but also the confidence she needed to move forward. He brought in painters and carpenters, transforming the formerly somber environment into a warm and bright home. "How are you feeling today, Sarah?" James would ask during one of his daily visits while Lily played with a new set of toys on the living room floor. "A bit better, James. Seeing the apartment transform helps me believe that things can really change for the better," Sarah would respond, offering him a shy smile, which James returned with affection. As the weeks passed, James and Sarah began to go out together, initially to open and calm spaces like parks and gardens where Lily could play while they talked about everything except the recent trauma. It was during these outings that James realized how much his affection for Sarah had grown, a feeling that began to intertwine with his admiration for her strength and resilience. "You're incredible, Sarah, not just for everything you've gone through but for the way you're rebuilding your life," James confessed on a sunny afternoon as they watched Lily chase butterflies. Sarah blushed slightly, touched by his words. "I couldn't have done it without you, James. You came at just the right time and changed everything for the better." Despite the growing romantic atmosphere, James knew that Sarah's recovery journey was far from over. They faced legal challenges with the case against Victor still ongoing and regular visits to a therapist to help Sarah cope with the trauma. "Every day is a step forward, Sarah, and I'll be here with you at every step," he promised, holding her hand as they walked back home after a day outdoors. However, despite the new beginnings and the growing bond between them, the reality of legal and emotional complications sometimes cast a shadow over their moments of happiness. As they prepared to face the next chapter of their lives, James knew the path ahead would still demand a lot from both of them. It was a quiet afternoon, and as Lily slept after a long day of play, James and Sarah sat together on the couch, sharing a moment of silence. James's phone rang, breaking the calm of the moment. It was his lawyer with news about the case against Victor, a conversation they knew to be inevitable but still hesitated to begin. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, James, Sarah, and Lily settled into a tranquil life filled with small pleasures and daily discoveries. They established a routine that interwove their lives in such a way that each day seemed to bring a new reason to be thankful. Lily was growing quickly, her laughter the soundtrack of their days, and her insatiable curiosity the spark for many family adventures. One serene afternoon as they sat in their garden watching Lily play, James held Sarah's hand. "Can you believe how much our lives have changed?" he asked, a warm smile on his lips. Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and love. "Sometimes it feels like a dream, one that I never want to end," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You've transformed our lives, James, in ways I never imagined possible." It was true, what had begun as a compassionate gesture on a rainy night had evolved into a deep emotional connection. They had woven a tapestry of life together that neither had anticipated but now neither could imagine any other way. "I will always be here for you too, no matter what happens. We will face anything together," James said, determined. Sarah nodded, knowing that with James by her side, she could face anything. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, a figure approached their home's gate. It was Michael, the lawyer, with a solemn expression that immediately made James stand up. "James, Sarah, sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk," Michael began, looking seriously at both of them. "I received a call from the police. There's news about Victor, and apparently about something you need to know." James and Sarah exchanged a concerned look, each feeling a twinge of anxiety about what was to come. "What happened, Michael?" James asked, his tone steady. "Victor, he made a full confession, but it's not just about the crimes we knew," Michael explained, pausing to ensure he had their attention. "He revealed he was being manipulated, part of a larger scheme that involved some quite influential people in the city, and Sarah, it seems your father was involved." The shock of this revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "My father? But how? He never mentioned." "Yes, it seems he was deep in debt with some dangerous people. Victor was being used to pressure you, to manipulate situations that benefited your father without your knowing," Michael continued, each word weighing in the air. Sarah's past, which they thought they had left behind, had resurfaced with a twist none of them expected. What had started as a redemption story now intertwined with a plot of deeper intrigues and mysteries. James squeezed Sarah's hand, reaffirming his silent commitment to face any challenges that came their way. "What does this mean for us?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "We'll find out together," James responded, his determination clear. "Nothing will tear us apart." Thus, amid startling revelations, James, Sarah, and Lily prepared to face the ramifications of this new threat, united and resilient. Their story was far from over, each new page a promise of struggles but also of unshakable hope and love. They now knew that no matter what fate held, they would face it together as a family. In the months that followed, they took every precaution. James ensured that their home was fortified, both physically and legally. He introduced Sarah to opportunities where she could rebuild her career while providing for Lily. They moved to a new, safer neighborhood, where the past seemed less likely to find them. James and Sarah grew even closer, their bond strengthened by shared trials and the joy of watching Lily thrive. They learned self-defense together, ensuring that they could protect themselves if needed. They also made it a point to enjoy life, traveling when possible, creating memories that would overshadow the shadows of their past. The legal battles were arduous, but with Michael's help and the truth coming to light, justice was eventually served. Victor and those behind the scheme faced the consequences of their actions, and Sarah's father, realizing the harm he had caused, sought to make amends, though from a distance. One evening, as they sat together, watching the sunset from their new home's porch, James turned to Sarah with a contemplative look. "You know, Sarah, life threw us into chaos, but in that chaos, we found each other, found love, and found a family we didn't even know we needed." Sarah smiled, her hand finding his. "And we'll keep building this family, this life, no matter what comes our way. Together, we're unstoppable." Their story, born from a moment of kindness in the rain, had grown into a testament of love, resilience, and the unyielding human spirit. It was a story that inspired and would continue to unfold with each new day, each new challenge faced not as individuals but as a united front, a family bonded by more than blood, by choice, by love, and by the silent promise made under the glow of streetlights on a rainy night. Months had passed since the revelations about Sarah's father and the criminal network that had ensnared Victor. James, Sarah, and Lily had built what felt like an impregnable fortress of love and trust around themselves. Their new home, nestled in a quiet, leafy suburb, was a symbol of their rebirth. The garden was now lush with flowers that Lily loved to chase butterflies among, her laughter a melody that filled the air with joy. James had not only ensured their physical safety but had also become a pillar in Sarah's professional life. With his connections, he helped her secure a position at a local nonprofit organization that focused on helping families break free from cycles of abuse and poverty, work that resonated deeply with her own experiences. She thrived, finding purpose where once there had been pain. One crisp autumn evening, with the leaves outside turning into a spectacular palette of colors, James and Sarah sat on their back porch, watching Lily draw with chalk on the patio. The air was cool, hinting at the approaching winter, but the warmth of their little family created a bubble of comfort around them. "James," Sarah began, her voice thoughtful, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" James looked at her, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun. "Every day, Sarah. But not in the way you might think. I don't dwell on what might have been, instead, I'm grateful for what is. That night, I found more than just you and Lily, I found a part of myself I didn't know was missing." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, the silence between them filled with understanding. "We've come so far," she said after a while. "And we've done it together." "Yes, we have," James agreed. "And we'll continue to do so. Every challenge, every joy. Lily, oblivious to the depth of their conversation, ran over, her chalk-covered hands reaching up for James. He scooped her into his arms, her giggles infectious. "Look at what I drew, Daddy," she exclaimed, showing off her colorful scribbles. James felt a surge of emotion at the word Daddy. Though not her biological father, he had fully embraced the role, loving Lily with every fiber of his being. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. You're an artist in the making." That night, after putting Lily to bed, James and Sarah sat down to discuss a new venture. "I've been thinking," James said, pulling out some paperwork from his briefcase, "about starting something of our own. A foundation, maybe, to help families like yours, to give them a chance at the kind of life we've built here." Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. "James, that's incredible. I'd love to be part of that. We could really make a difference." "We already have, Sarah. But yes, let's do this." Together, James affirmed, their vision for the future aligning in that moment. The foundation, named New Beginnings, became their new project. They used James's business acumen and Sarah's first-hand experience to create programs that offered not just shelter but education, job training, and psychological support. The work was demanding but fulfilling, watching other families find their path out of darkness. As the foundation grew, so did the bonds within their own family. James proposed to Sarah one winter evening, under the stars, with Lily watching in wonder. "Will you marry me, Sarah, and make this family official, not just in our hearts but in every way?" Tears of happiness streamed down Sarah's face as she nodded, unable to speak through her joy. Lily clapped her hands, understanding the significance of the moment even if not the full implications. They all knew, though, that this was a step towards a new chapter, one filled with love and commitment. Their wedding was a modest affair, held in their garden, surrounded by friends who had become family and the staff of New Beginnings who had become their extended family. It was a celebration of love, resilience, and hope. Lily was the flower girl, scattering petals with the earnestness of a child deeply involved in the magic of the day. Life, however, was not without its reminders of the past. One day, while at the foundation, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. It was her father, Edward, looking older and much more subdued than she remembered. He had been working on himself, attending therapy, and wanted to apologize, to make amends. "It's not about forgiveness, Sarah," Edward said, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I just want you to know I see what I did, what I put you through. I'm trying to be better, for you, for Lily, for anyone who might still care." Sarah listened, her heart a mixture of old wounds and the potential for healing. She didn't invite him back into their lives but acknowledged his effort. "Thank you for trying, Dad. We're moving forward, and I hope you can too, in your way." James was there for her, supporting whatever decision she made, reinforcing that their family was her fortress, her sanctuary. Years passed, and their foundation flourished, becoming a beacon of hope in the community. Lily grew into a smart, compassionate teenager, proud of her parents for all they had achieved. James and Sarah, now with gray hairs and shared laughter lines, looked back on their journey with a sense of accomplishment and peace. One evening, sitting together in their now expanded garden, watching another sunset, James turned to Sarah. "You know, all those years ago, when I saw you under that street light, I was terrified, unsure. But now, looking back, I see it was the start of the most beautiful journey of my life." Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the love and life they had built. "And we've walked this path together, making every step count. It's been our journey, James, one of love, forgiveness, and renewal." They didn't need to look far for inspiration, their lives were a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the endless possibilities that come when one chooses to make a difference. As they sat there, hand in hand, with Lily sketching in her notebook nearby, they knew they had created something beautiful, not just for themselves but for others too. Life is about moments like these, James mused aloud, where you realize every struggle was worth it for this peace, this love. And it's about looking forward, Sarah added, knowing we have so much more to give, to share, to experience together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over everything, James, Sarah, and Lily felt not the end but the continuation of their story, one that would inspire others, one that would go on, filled with love, laughter, and the light of new beginnings.